Now more is less with Cox Internet.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Chase with Jace, a Week 3 edition. Another week is coming up for the LSU Fighting Tigers. I'm your host, Jace Lejeune, LSU beat writer for Gridiron Football. Man, we got a loaded show here today. We're going to recap what was expected win for the LSU Tigers against the Grambling State Tigers. We'll talk a little bit about that game in just a little bit. And then we'll also look ahead. We'll look ahead to this week. At the end of the week, it is the LSU Tigers. We'll go on the road to start SEC play against the Mississippi State Bulldogs. We'll break down that matchup as well and what to kind of expect as well. So if you have a question, too, this is your opportunity. So if you have any questions, anything you want to know about the LSU Tigers, feel free to comment in the comment section and chat with us, and I'll go and answer any of your questions that you have for the LSU Tigers by the end of the show. But for right now, we'll just kind of dive deep into it, and that is talking about the LSU Tigers and their win last week against Grambling. And it was actually the home opener for LSU. It was a pretty good crowd on hand. A lot of recruits were there, probably about over 100 recruits were there for the LSU game in Tiger Stadium, so it was a pretty big crowd, really, especially after coming off a disappointing loss the week before against Florida State. It was good to see a pretty good crowd on hand in Tiger Stadium. We'll go into it and talk about the Grambling game, so if you haven't got a chance for whatever reason to watch that game or read a recap or just dive into that game and get your eyes on that game, well, LSU handled business the way they were supposed to. There was no question about whether or not LSU was going to win the game. It was definitely LSU was going to win the game. I mean, just look at the teams on paper, and LSU is just the inferior opponent. You know, when it comes to Grambling State, no offense to Grambling State, they got a really good program in the SWAC. Hugh Jackson's going to really get this team rolling. I really like what this Grambling State team can do in the SWAC and contend, as far as the HBCU national championships. Because at the end of the day, this is a very proud program, and they want to compete for national championships. You talk about the history, Eddie Robinson, all the great players going to play in the NFL and coming in the Hall of Fame. That is great as well. So now we're going to talk about the game. LSU pretty much handled business. Final score 72-10 was the final score of that one, and really, like I said, it's not expected by how much LSU won the game. Everybody knew LSU was going to win the game. The question was, how would it look? And it looked pretty good, especially if you're talking about the offensive side of the football. It was a great night for Jaden Daniels in the first half, and it was really good to see because the passing game, it was inconsistent. I mean, I asked Brian Kelly about this after the loss to Florida State, it was inconsistent. They hit on some big plays, but once they got into the red zone, it stiffened up for them. They had problems trying to connect and trying to get in the red zone, trying to convert in the red zone. That ultimately was the biggest problem for LSU. But there were plays to be made. There were some drop passes, some inconsistency there. But it was really good to see much more of a consistent passing performance from Jaden Daniels, and it was actually a record-breaking type of performance. In fact, Jaden Daniels, he threw for 5 touchdown passes in that game, and it was pretty incredible. He threw for 269 yards, 5 touchdowns, and all he had to do was he threw about only 6 incompletions. So he was really, really good that night. And he really distributed the football to hit all of his wide receivers. He had 5 touchdown passes in the first half, and he joins Joe Burrow as the only other quarterback to ever do that, to throw 5 touchdowns in one half of play. And he, like I said, he distributed the football really well. He threw touchdown passes to Brian Thomas Jr. Brian Thomas had the first touchdown catch, and then he had another touchdown catch later. He threw the 47-yard touchdown to Chris Hilton Jr. That was really good to see Chris Hilton get involved in the touchdown catch. He's really LSU's deep threat. We've seen it all through fall camp and what he can do as a wide receiver. He was really good throughout fall camp. I think if it was Malik Neighbors or Chris Hilton, I thought they had themselves their best fall camp. And then Connor Lacey got involved as well. So 5 touchdowns between the 4 receivers, over 269 yards. It was a first half record. It was exactly what you wanted to see from Jaden Daniels in this passing game. So just what you wanted to see. And I actually got a chance to ask Brian Kelly about this pretty much after the game. And it was the post game, it was in the locker room. Got a chance to ask Brian Kelly about what he thought about his play, Jaden Daniels' play in the game with a 5 touchdown performance. Obviously, he said that he was going to take the 5 touchdowns, but there is room to grow. Here's what Brian Kelly said when I asked him about Jaden Daniels' performance.
Coach, so Jaden Daniels had a really good first half, 5 touchdown passes in the first half, looked pretty comfortable in the offense. What are your thoughts on how he performed tonight?
You know, it's hard to take issue with, 5 touchdown passes, but I would say that in the huddle, and when I say the huddle, I mean Jaden, myself, Mike Denbrock, Joe Sloan. We would say that he left some throws out there that we need to get better at. So we're pleased. We're not going to walk away here and be ungrateful for the things that we accomplished, but we have some work to do.
Ryan, you said post-game that
So that's what Brian Kelly had to say about Jaden Daniels' performance. And if you go look in our website, gridironfootballusa.com, you'll probably see an article about it. But it shows you what the potential is in this passing game. For Jaden Daniels to throw 5 touchdown passes, to throw to 4 different receivers, and to have only 6 incompletions, throw for almost 300 yards in the first half, and for Brian Kelly to say that this is the could have been much more. It could have been better. There's much more room to improve there. That's saying a lot about how lethal this passing game can really be. So for him to say that Jaden Daniels missed a couple of throws, which he did, but he felt comfortable in the offense. He distributed the football. He stood in the pocket. He didn't take off and run really that much. So it seemed like he's getting more and more comfortable in the pocket. He's going through his progressions. So he's taking the right steps, and you can tell that they worked on it. Now, can they take on that and improve it forward? It's one thing to do that against Grambling. It's another thing to do that in the SEC each week. So, and especially with the problems on the defensive side of the football, this offense, they're going to have to outscore a lot of people. As just seeing them in the first 2 games with the problems that they've had on the defensive side of the football, at times they are going to need that offense to outscore a lot of teams. So that's just a matter of fact. So that whole offensive coaching staff is working really hard and making sure everybody's in sync. Whether it was Mike Denbrock, whether it's Joe Sloan, Brian Kelly, Jaden Daniels, everybody has to be in sync with each other. And that's what he meant by being in the huddle, making sure that he is in command of the offense, and he was like he was in command of the offense. Now, that was definitely a positive takeaway from it, and we'll also talk about some of the other takeaways too. But before we do that, hear from Brian Kelly. This is what Brian Kelly's pretty much game recap against Grambling, what he had to say too in that game, what he thought about that game, even though he pretty much knew that LSU was going to run away with it with Grambling, but he wanted his team to play the level of football what is expected of them when you play and put on that purple and gold. There's just a level of play when you get recruited, to play at a program like LSU. There's only so much a high expectation everybody is looking for you to really do and really exceed at. And Brian Kelly really wanted to see that level of play of 4 quarters from his team, and he felt he got that on Saturday night. So here's Brian Kelly, what he had to say about the Grambling game.
Things. The game this past weekend, I think we talked about it last week. We want to play the game the right way, and playing for 4 quarters, starting fast, building momentum, and then leaving no doubt about what the outcome is, and putting away your opponent. Those are the tenets of playing 4 quarters of LSU football. We certainly didn't do that in week 1, and we wanted to make sure that was how we played the second game, regardless of who the opponent was. And we have a great deal of respect for Grambling, and we're excited about the game itself. But it really didn't matter all week from the perspective of who we were playing, rather as how we played the game. And I was pleased with the way we played the game. I was also very, very pleased with the way we handled our emotions. It got chippy out there. Our team had 2 penalties the entire game, and their discipline and their ability to maintain their pose and composure, I was very proud of them in that respect. On offense, when you score on your first 10 possessions, there's not much more you can say at any level, but great efficiency from an offensive perspective. Defensively, we had some, I would say, missed assignments early on. The tackling certainly wasn't what we needed early on. We were probably a little bit too anxious. We settled down, and certainly in the second half, played the kind of defense that we expected to, and limited Grambling to 4 first downs, I think, and 61 total yards in the second half, and that kind of dominating defenses.
So that was Brian Kelly talking about the Grambling game, and it's expected. It's expected that LSU goes in there and to win. And really, you're not going to please the fan base no matter what you do in these type of games, especially if you're coming off a loss like Florida State. It's just what it is, right? If you win the football game, everybody's going to be saying, well, of course you're going to win the football game. You're playing against an inferior opponent. You're playing against an FCS team. You're going to win the football game. It's not a doubt, right? So you can't really please anybody no matter how much you win by. LSU won by 62 points. But you're not going to please everybody with these type of games. You're expected to win. LSU, give credit to LSU. They went in there and they took care of business. They handled their business, and they got a lot out of it. So, but you're not going to really please anybody with this type of game until you go against some really good competition for LSU that can match up with LSU and see how they can improve from there. But if you lose this game or you don't look good, then a lot of people will be chewing you out. when you play a team like this. So it's kind of like a lose-lose situation for LSU, but it's really a game about LSU. It's all about LSU working on what they need to get better at, and then you kind of look into a mirror about where are some of the biggest weaknesses on this team when some of those weaknesses show up against Grambling. And then there was a big weakness that we saw against Florida State that we saw against Grambling, and it's been so far a lot of concerns in the secondary on the defensive side of the football. You saw Denver Harris, who was majority took third team snaps with the defense. We saw that all through fall practice. Now he actually got his opportunity to go in the starting lineup, and he's a heralded player, right? From Texas, 5-star, Texas A&M, very heralded player. And he comes in and got his opportunity to start, and it was a rough start. Let's just say what it is. He gave up the touchdown, was mossed on the touchdown on that first drive that Grambling scored when they tied the game at 7. And 2 drives later, he committed a pass interference penalty. But Brian Kelly, he talked about really Denver Harris and the struggles, and you're going to hear that clip a little bit later in the show. But basically, he was just saying that he grew up playing high school football. He was just a better athlete than everybody else was. So he played man to man when he was playing in high school. So he's got to get used to playing zone and playing all these type of different coverages, these type of formations that he wasn't used to really playing in high school. So that's really a big a maturing thing for him. And what Brian Kelly said about Denver Harris is that he is willing to learn. And that's really the first step of being able to learn, being able to grow. And you're allowed to improve over the course of the season. So it happens. This LSU football team last year, they improved over the course of the season. So that's what football teams do. Really, you take your biggest steps, like from week 1 to week 2, or week 2 to week 3. Early in the season, that's where you grow and find your identity as a football team. No matter if you're a veteran team or you're an experienced team, you take your biggest steps from the very beginning of the season, from week 1 to week 2, week 3, and you just grow from there. And I feel like this LSU football team could do that. And LSU defensively got better. In the football game, they gave up over 160 yards in those first 2 drives. It was not pretty. It started looking like it was going to be a shootout with Grambling in the first quarter. And it really pretty much was. Give credit to Grambling. Grambling has a pretty good quarterback in Miles Crawley, and they went right down the field, and he scored. They went 80-plus yards and scored in the opening possession. It wasn't just a secondary. They got gashed in the running game. They gave up like a 30-yard run on 3rd and 10. So it's really the whole defense as a whole that needs to play better. Now the defense settled in after giving up the 10 points. They pretty much shut down Grambling the rest of the way. So kudos to Matt House and the defense and for adjusting to the first 2 drives and really doing what they need to do on the defensive side of the football. And if there's one takeaway from the Grambling game that I'm going to go to, and you can kind of look at this. If you want more information about what I think about the Grambling game, I'm not going to dive deep into it, but if you want more information, you can always go to our website, the website that's right behind me here, gridironfootballusa.com, in order to do that, to get more information about that game. And what I think my takeaways were. But if there's one more takeaway I have to say about this game, and it is the running game. It was really good to see. The running game was pretty much non-existent against Florida State, and it involved 2 players that we did not see against Florida State get a lot of carries. You see him in the picture right there, Logan Diggs. Logan Diggs, if there's one takeaway you would pretty much get from this game, that takeaway is this running game and the capabilities of this running game, what it can go through. We all knew about the talent level, but we didn't know who was going to emerge at that position. Brian Kelly, he got Logan Diggs. There's a reason why he got Logan Diggs twice. He recruited him. He signed to Notre Dame the first time from Rummel, from New Orleans. He got him to Notre Dame. And he got him a second time from Notre Dame to come to LSU. So there's a reason why he likes Logan Diggs so much. He's a complete back. He can do it all. You see him trying to jump right there in that picture taken by Billy Metcalf. He does an excellent job of making all these great shots and taking all these great shots. But Logan Diggs, he's pretty much your complete back. He showed it on Saturday. He ran for 115 yards. He did on 16 carries, scored a touchdown, and he did a little bit of everything. On that touchdown he scored, he actually, I think he carried the ball like 5 or 6 times on that touchdown drive. Like, he was the reason they scored that touchdown drive, and he ended up scoring a touchdown. So he can run inside. He's big. He's physical. He's over 220 pounds, but he's got some shiftiness too. He can move a little bit in the hole. He made a nice spin move in the hole too. He can catch out of the backfield. He can run the outside. He can pass protect. He is your best back. Logan Diggs, without a doubt, after what he showed in that game against Grambling when he was healthy. And that's the reason why he didn't really play against Florida State, because he was still nicked up a little bit. A reason that he showed up and came here because he had an opportunity to be RB1. And he showed why that he should be RB1. Now, the best 2 running backs, or probably I won't say best 2, but the most talented 2 running backs from that game or newcomers. You saw Logan Diggs, a transfer, and then you saw Caleb Jackson and what he was able to do. Caleb Jackson, a freshman from Liberty High School here in Baton Rouge, a Baton Rouge product, he pretty much won everybody over. I mean, when I say everybody, I mean the media, with what he did in the scrimmage. He took one screen for a touchdown for like 80 yards, and then a play before that, he bounced off 2 guys in the backfield and cut the outside and finished with some power in the end zone. There was a pretty big collision in the end zone, but he scored 2 touchdowns in the fall scrimmage. And that's when we started seeing more and more about Caleb Jackson. Caleb Jackson got his opportunity mostly in the second half, but he showed why he could be that guy for LSU. He's definitely has a bright future in his offense, and him being over 220 pounds, he just always plows forward. You know, he's got a little, he can move a little bit like Logan. He's a big back that can move, and he's got some good feet in the hole. But he does a great job of finishing runs and finishing through contact and getting yards after contact. And just seeing what I saw on Saturday night, I think you got your 2 guys. I mean, the 2 guys that can probably give you your best chance. Now, this is still a talented running back room, and Brian Kelly mentioned it. This may be an instance where whoever has the hot hand at the running back position, they may get more of the carries. And this time it was more Logan Diggs, and it was more Caleb Jackson. But Josh Williams looked pretty nice, had some pretty good carries, and he's still there in the backfield. He was your RB1 last year. And Noah Cain got the game ball, right? So Brian Kelly still loves Noah Cain. What he's able to do, you get John Emery back, and you spell him out in there. So this running back room, it showed on Saturday what it's capable of being, just like the passing game showed what it's capable of being. But that's pretty much all I have to say about the Grambling game, LSU and Grambling. And now it's time to move forward. Now, can LSU grow from this? We saw that last year, right? Similar scenario. You lose to Florida State, a disappointing game, season opener, and then you move on. You play a SWAC team. Last year it was Southern. This year it was Grambling. You looked good. You handled your business against those teams, and then they play their first SEC game against Mississippi State, and that's where LSU will have to play to start SEC play, and that's the Mississippi State Bulldogs. I'm going to play you a clip here. Harold Perkins, another takeaway I had, you can go look in an article too, but another takeaway I had from the game was I really like this coaching staff. They're not stingent on trying to fit a puzzle piece that doesn't fit. And Harold Perkins, they realize that, hey, this may not be the position that he can really fill in for us at middle linebacker. So you saw that a lot against Grambling, and to see him back in the flow of just, what we saw last year as a freshman. Just pin your ears back and just go and rush the passer, get in the backfield, be an athlete, see ball, go get ball, and that's what Harold Perkins did a little bit more of. He looked better in coverage, didn't look as lost out there. So it was really good to see, and it looks like LSU's trying to get back to what we saw from Harold Perkins, and you're pretty much going to need it, knowing that there's been some struggles in the secondary too. So he actually talks about it here, and I will actually get a chance for y'all to hear it from him. But Brian Kelly talks about Harold Perkins and what his new role will pretty much look like.
Ryan, you said post-game that Harold Perkins has a new position. What are y'all going to start asking him to do this maybe different from the first game, and what was the impetus for that change?
Well, we wanted to free him up a little bit. He's got a lot of responsibilities playing inside, and we just needed to let him go and let him play fast. We felt like, with all the things that we had asked him to do, we probably slowed him down a little bit. And one of the things that we have to do as coaches is know where your players are relative to, playing fast. And I think we saw in the very first play with the physicality he showed when the ball got out on the perimeter. That's not something that you want to do, is throw the ball out on the perimeter with Harold. So I think we made the right decision there, and now we'll refine what we do with him. Like, we can move him around, we can move him inside and outside, and do some things that can keep him in a position to impact the game, and that's what we're trying to do.
So that was Brian Kelly talking about, talking about Harold Perkins and how he's going to move him around and go back to the original position which we was doing, right? Just going off the edge and just being an athlete, rushing the passer, getting in the backfield, making plays, and they're going to need that because this front seven, it's pretty heralded, right? The depth is there in the front and defensive line. You got Perkins, you got Omar Spates. And you got some really good guys in the front seven, so those guys will need to step up and help the secondary as most as they possibly can. And like I said, always moving things around with personnel. They did that with Harold Perkins. They said, well, it didn't work against Florida State. Let's just go back to what was good for him and what was best for the team, and that was Harold Perkins going off the edge and just rushing the passer. They're also kind of finicking and working things with the offense as well. And when I mean the offense, I mean the offensive line, personnel-wise. The first game, you saw Miles Frazier at right guard. And because Miles Frazier played guard last year, you had your starting five, what you had pretty much all season. When you had Will Campbell left tackle, you had Dellinger at left guard, you had Charles Turner at center, and you had Frazier at right guard and Emory Jones right tackle. The thing is, this year you got yourself a 5-star freshman who's, a mammoth out there, has a chance to be a very special player by the time his LSU career is over, and Lance Hurd. Lance Hurd also played with Will Campbell at Neville. And you can tell that just the physicality he brings, just the brute strength that he brings as a player, they're going to put him and trying to put him at right tackle. And Emory Jones, who excelled at right tackle last year, he's more naturally a guard. So they're trying to work him in at right guard and work in Lance Hurd at right tackle. But at the same time, they don't want to throw a freshman right out there against Mississippi State for the whole game. Even though they did that last year, we go back with Will Campbell and Emory Jones. That's when they both started together for the first time for a whole game, was that Mississippi State game a year ago. But they're going to just ease, because of the depth you got that on the offensive line and the veterans that you have on the offensive line, you actually can afford to have Lance Hurd play a little bit more than he was used to. So Lance Hurd is going to get some starting reps. He got some starting reps against Grambling, looked really good. Brian Kelly was very impressed with him, and really we know was the difference in the running game too, and that's how they were so successful on the right side when running to the right side in the running game. Caleb Jackson scored pretty much following big number 53. Was one of his touchdowns in the football game too. But they're easing him in there and not trying to really put too much pressure on him as a freshman. So I like what the coaching staff is really doing there, but getting him a lot of experience. But Brian Kelly, he talks a little bit more about what Lance Hurd and what his role would be with the offensive line.
we liked his presence in the lineup. He was assignment correct. He was physical at the point of contact, and we felt like, by and large, for a first time in a collegiate, football game, he handled the emotions of the game very well. So I think we're on track to kind of similarly do what we did in the last game with him in the next game as well. Miles will still start at guard, but there's going to be a rotation.
It was Brian Kelly talking about Lance Hurd in his debut, and is pretty much what I just said. Lance Hurd is a talented freshman, 5-star freshman, and LSU had some pretty talented freshmen last year with Emory Jones and Will Campbell. But instead of him just starting like they did with him with the 2 tackles last year, with the veterans they got, the depth they got, they can afford Lance Hurd just kind of fit himself and get some starting reps on the right side. And we're going to see a little bit more and more of that from now. Starting the way is going to be Miles Frazier at guard and Emory Jones at right tackle. But more and more, you can kind of see this throughout the season. You're going to see more and more of Hurd at tackle and Emory Jones at guard. So you'll probably see a little more and more of that as the season continues on, because there is a lot of potential when you get Lance Hurd, number 53, at right tackle. He's just got to continue to learn, continue to grow. He's only a freshman. So this is a young offensive line, but can have a chance to be a really good offensive line by the end of the year. Some other notes from Brian Kelly. He gave an injury report too. Mason Taylor, I know there's a lot of questions about Mason Taylor. We saw it up from the press box. Mason Taylor just limped off the field, and he actually went to the locker room. It turned out it was an ankle sprain. We actually saw Mason Taylor run back to the sideline after coming from the locker room. It looks like he was, it was good. Like if it was a bigger game, if it was an SEC opponent, you would have seen Mason Taylor go back in the game. But they couldn't really afford Mason Taylor getting hurt, and it happened I believe early third quarter or early second half when that happened with Mason Taylor. So they couldn't really afford him being out there. But Brian Kelly, as y'all got pretty much grown to accustomed to this, Brian Kelly gives an injury report each week on some of the Tigers, and he gave an injury report on Mason Taylor, and he also gave one. I was kind of surprised by this. Omar Spates, the star linebacker at LSU, who comes in as a transfer from Oregon State, where he's an all Pac-12 player. So Brian Kelly is going to give an injury report right here. Get to hear pretty quickly, about 10-second clip about what he had to say about Taylor and Spates.
We have 2 probables. We have probable is Mason Taylor, and probable is Omar Spates.
So that's what he had to say about that. When it comes to injury stats on both, looks like both are probable. Both are going to play, so that's really good news. And you're going to need both those guys. You're going to need both Omar Spates, and you're going to need both Mason Taylor too. Looking forward to see Mason Taylor get more involved with the passing game like he did against Florida State. Made a lot of plays in the Florida State game, but it shows you there's a lot of depth, a lot of skilled position players, a lot of guys that can make plays, whether it's Mason Taylor at tight end or the 4 receivers I talked about with Neighbors, Lacey, Thomas, and Chris Hilton. So a lot of options you can go there in the passing game. Trying to see if there's any other more quick clips from Brian Kelly. Oh, he does address the secondary too, and the struggles in the secondary. Really the thoughts there. It looks like the guys are in position. It looks like Zai Alexander's in position. Looks like Dever Harris is in position. Just cannot make the plays. Just cannot finish the plays. This group is going to improve. I mean, is that ever going to be a strength of the team for this year? I don't think so, but I think this can be a group, a defensive backfield that can improve and get better game after game, and they're going to need that. I mean, they're playing against a very experienced quarterback, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in Will Rogers, and that's been playing pretty much forever since he's been here in Mississippi State. So that's going to be another tough test for the secondary. But Brian Kelly, he was asked about the struggles, just plain and simple, the struggles in the secondary, and he gives what he thinks about those struggles and how really LSU can overcome them.
Yes. Yeah, we knew that we were playing new players back there, and the challenges were going to be in developing players with very little experience, but with talent. But talent is only one part of the equation. It's developing, the consistency and doing the little things that require playing at a high level, tackling, leveraging the football, being in the right leverage, whether it's inside leverage or outside leverage, raking through the basket, when the ball's in the air and getting it out, and which we've done, much better in week 2. So I think all of those things were going to be work in progress for us. We competed well for the ball in the air. I think what we'd like to see better is our technique to improve, the fundamentals, and probably the tackling.
Yeah, I mean, there were some struggles. I mean, we saw it, right? I mean, pretty much everybody saw it. Everybody saw it against Florida State, and struggles continued. And we're worrisome against Grambling, but there were some bright spots. I mean, Zion Alexander came in a couple plays, made a couple PBUs, especially in the second half. He was really thrown against a lot in the first half. We talked about the struggles with Denver Harris, but a guy that I want to see get more and more opportunities, because every time he's been out there, I mean, he's made plays, and he's been with in the rotation really this fall camp, and that's Ashton Stamps. I'm curious how much LSU is going to put trust in him to get more and more action, because in the second half he made some pretty good plays. I mean, he's been pretty poised as a freshman out there making plays. Now, do you trust him out there to go on the road and play against an SEC environment with the loud cowbells and everything against Mississippi State? Well, we're going to find out if we're going to be able to trust him. But he's been a guy that's been a steady playmaker for you. He's made a lot of big plays in the second half of that Grambling game. So I'm curious to see if we're going to get more and more looks at Ashton Stamps as we move on, as we go towards later in the year. And then let's just move on. Let's move on to Mississippi State as a big game, as a first road game, true road game for LSU in the SEC opener. And you're going to have to deal with a lot of things. You're going to deal with 11 o'clock kickoff. You're going to deal with on the road in a hostile environment. So here are a couple plays. Not a couple plays, but a couple clips. Brian Kelly talking about, first of all, preparing for an environment like that, preparing for a loud, ruckus environment, and doing so at 11 o'clock a.m. And then he also talks about Mississippi State. This is going to pretty much be about 360 on what kind of team that we've usually seen with Mississippi State in the last couple of years. So hear from Brian Kelly what he'd say about just the matchup overall with the Mississippi State Bulldogs.
You mentioned in your open a couple times having to deal with playing at 11 a.m. A couple of games last year at 11 a.m. weren't great. Are you going to do anything differently, or how do you approach what you did last year for the early kick?
Well, not that we would do anything differently, but we do things in our preparation that matches an early start. For example, in our practice schedule, we'll do some things that accelerate our team articulation. In other words, we're not going to go individual and work our way into group and then get to team. We'll go to team right away. You got to turn it on immediately. we'll do some things relative to getting our senses awakened earlier on game day. We're going to start with our team meal at around 7:20 in the morning. We're going to have an hour bus ride, so we'll have to handle all of those things a little bit differently than a normal routine. We have a shakeout during a night game, so this is going to be a totally different schedule than that they've been presented with. So we'll use some of the things we did last year, and I think that sets them up for a little bit more of an Mississippi State, but we play on the road, and playing on the road in the SEC is a great challenge. Playing an SEC opponent obviously doubles that, and then you've got to deal with all of the things that go with travel, playing at 11 a.m., cowbells, all of those things. But you do it first and foremost with starting with great preparation this week, and then your performance. If you play really well, you don't have to deal with all those distractions like any other opponent. If you're not playing very well, you're going to hear the, any team's, band slogans, whatever they have. So this is really about, the challenge of playing on the road, handling the 11 a.m. start, playing a really well-coached football team. Zach Arnett's done a great job in his very short time of being a head coach. They're really well coached defensively. The scheme that they employ is the same as last year, which has a lot of moving parts out of their 3-down defense. And again, it's a difficult defense to go against. Offensively, there's some quite a different change there. Going away from the air raid offense, going to a much more traditional offense. It is one that certainly that many see in college football, but they've got some really good players. Will Rogers is probably one of the most experienced quarterbacks in the SEC. 35 straight starts. So when you have that, you've got experience at the quarterback position. It's a really good thing. He's got 11,000 career passing yards. Jaquavius Marks, outstanding running back, and again another guy that 2,100 yards rushing in games in 23 combined. It leads the SEC in rushing through 2 games. 2 100-yard games. I misspoke already in 2023. It's a good football team. So well coached. They've got depth. With numbers on defense in terms of seniors and graduate seniors. So coming off a really good win in overtime against Arizona. So a great challenge for our football team. And again, anytime you go on the road, I think their returners are weapons. They've got 2 outstanding return men in terms of their punt returns and kickoff returns. Both of them were All-Americans last year. So we've got a challenge in special teams. We've got a challenge in facing a veteran quarterback and outstanding running back, and certainly
And Brian Kelly giving a quick scouting report on Mississippi State and what kind of opponent they should be seeing in Starkville. Well, everybody knows what the situation is when you talk about Mississippi State and just the unfortunate circumstances. This was actually the first SEC game I covered last year, which was against Mississippi State, and seeing Mike Leach on the sideline. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see that. It was very tough day, and really it was a very tough day when everybody got the word that Mike Leach passed away last year. It was very sad to see. I mean, Mike Leach was one of the faces, the voices of college football. And for him not to be here anymore was one of the great personalities, play callers, minds in college football. And to not have him here, college football just feels different, without Mike Leach here with us. So you can only imagine what the transition must have been like for really Zach Arnett, right? I mean, Zach Arnett, first opportunity as a head coach, and not only to replace a guy like Mike Leach, but to do that in those type of circumstances, I mean, very tough act to follow. But Zach Arnett's doing a pretty good job, I have to say, right now. The Bulldogs are 2-0 to start the season. They had themselves a very emotional win last week against with a lot of ups and downs, right, against Arizona. SEC Pac-12 matchup. They played last year, too, at Arizona. This time they played at Mississippi State. And it was pretty much a back-and-forth battle. The game went into overtime. Mississippi State pretty much got the win when they stopped Arizona's quarterback. He was trying to scramble on 4th down and 10. Was pretty much got tripped up about a yard short, and that's how Mississippi State was able to get the victory. 31-24. And they forced the Mississippi State Bulldogs defense forced 5 turnovers. So that was the thing we saw in the LSU game. They got stopped a couple of times on 4th down. Jaden Daniels threw an interception against Florida State. Well, this is a secondary. Sean Preston, who's a Louisiana native, who played his football at St. James High School, was a great football player. His brother, Shaz, he's playing at Alabama. But the Preston brothers have been really good football players at St. James, and they're now doing their stuff in the SEC. Jet Johnson was the SEC co-defensive player of the week, had 11 stops, 2 TFLs, and a sack in that football game, and a great defense performance. This is opportunistic defense, forcing 5 turnovers, I believe 3 or 4 interceptions in that football game too. And the defense, they've given up a lot of big plays in that game, and really their quarterback, if you go back and watch, he made a lot of really big plays against the secondary against Mississippi State. So this is really a feast or famine type defense, and LSU's got the weapons, they got the receivers to really score a lot of points on Mississippi State. But at the same time, Jaden Daniels, who's been really a good football player over his career at LSU at protecting the football, not making a lot of mistakes. If they get a mix of those things of being explosive in the passing game, while not being able to turn the football a lot, then that's a really good mix for LSU in that game, and LSU will have a lot of success against Mississippi State. Now, looking on the offensive side of the football, you're thinking to yourself, you're just looking on the outside and seeing what Mississippi State has done the last couple of years under Mike Leach. You're expecting, air raid, throw the football 50, 60 times a game every single week. Will Rogers, he has a chance of being the most prolific passer in SEC history. I think he's had over 11,000 yards passing in his career in his time at Starksville. But you're thinking they're going to throw the football all over the place. Could be a terrible matchup against LSU's DBs, right? Well, they're doing more. I mean, as far as the philosophy is concerned, they're not doing the air raid. They're not throwing the football 70 times a game. You're not going to see what LSU had to put up against back in 2020, the first game of the Mike Leach era, when I think KJ Costello threw for 6 touchdown passes against LSU and just lit up LSU's secondary. It's going to be really a 360-degree turnaround on what they want to do offensively. In the game against Arizona, all right, and this is a really close football game. You got yourself a veteran quarterback that's had, close to 40 starts in his career at Mississippi State. You're thinking they're going to throw the football a whole lot? No. Looking at the numbers, I believe that Will Rogers only attempted 17 passes in that game, and he didn't really throw a lot of passes the week before against Southeastern when Mississippi State beat Southeastern too. So only 17 pass attempts. They rated the ball with Jaquavius Marks. Now, Jaquavius Marks is definitely a player to look out for. Set a single-season record at Mississippi State for catches by a running back. But he's shown he can carry the football too. Look at the numbers. He had 24 carries, 123 yards, and a touchdown against Arizona. He is a really good running back, one of the best in the SEC, so LSU has to be careful when going up against Jaquavius Marks, Woody, as his nickname is called. But he's going to be a guy they're going to lean on this offense. They're going running game. So even though you're going to have a veteran quarterback, and Will Rogers has made a lot of plays over his career, Mississippi State, their identity, they want to be more a pro-style offense. They want to be more of a balanced offense attack. They want to run the football and basically go off of the run and open things up in the passing game when you're going off the run. So this is a different mindset when it comes to Mississippi State. You're not going to see them throw the football 70, 80 times. They're going to lean more heavily on the running game, and that's really been an adjustment for the offensive line and really for an offense in general, because you bring a lot of guys in here that have been recruited to run the air raid offense, and it is an adjustment when you're trying to change into a different system. It is a different system out there when you're going from the air raid, and because your splits are different as an offensive lineman, and you have to really adjust to a lot of stuff over the offseason, and that just doesn't happen overnight. So we'll see if LSU's defensive line can get more havoc and shutting down the run game, getting pressure. This front seven, in order for LSU to have success, I'm going to go with the keys to victory about this game. And then my keys to victory, when you're going just looking at Mississippi State and looking what they have, you have to be disciplined. You have to be disciplined in the running game. LSU really overran a lot of plays. When you go watch a lot of the film against Grambling, they overpursued a lot of plays. They left up a lot of big holes for Grambling to run through, and they were looking to make a lot of tackles. But when you're playing against a level up in competition, you're going to pay for it when you do that. You're going to give up 6 points when you do that. So this defensive line, these linebackers, when you look at Mason Smith, he made his return back with the team, got his first play of action. He's still not 100%, as you can pretty much can tell, because when you have to play, you go off a whole season without playing. There's going to be some rust, and there was some rust for Mason Smith, but it's going to be intriguing to see how he bounces back and how much we get back the old Mason Smith we saw from his freshman year. And the quicker he responds and the quicker that he just feels comfortable, it's going to make this defensive line even tougher to block, because this defensive line is the strength of this defense. When you look at Mekhi Wingo, Mason Smith, Savion Jones, and then off the edge you get a guy like Harold Perkins play the jack role, and have that freshman performer Harold Perkins back, the freshman version of Harold Perkins, then this defensive can force a lot of turnovers and make it easier on their DBs. So they have to be disciplined, but at the same time, the defensive front has to take over in this football game and help out their DBs while they're still trying to adjust and try and get comfortable as a unit. Because even though these are all veteran guys, you look at Deuce Chestnut, Zy Alexander, Sage Ryan, Greg Brooks, Major Burns, all these guys, it's not like they haven't played football before. All these guys are veterans in the back end, but they're just trying to get accustomed to playing with each other. It's like an offensive line, right? It's a chemistry type of position. Everybody has to be on the same page, and if everybody is not on the same page, whether you're on the offensive line or in the secondary, it's going to cost you for some negative plays. But the pass rush, which is what LSU was expecting, Matt Howell's down up pressure, more pressure against Will Rogers. You can't just sit back and let a veteran quarterback beat you. So you're going to have, no matter if the secondary had some concerns or not. So you have to go and make them force and make them react and make them make a lot of decisions quicker than what he originally thought would make. So we'll keep an eye on that and see how much this pass rush can improve in order to throw off Mississippi State's offense and maybe force a couple of turnovers while at it. So I'm very anxious to see where this pass rush can be. I feel like there were some times in the Florida State game that they had opportunities to get to Travis, but Travis, being a great quarterback that he is and a mobile quarterback that he is, he was able to extend and make plays and really burn LSU by doing that, right? So I'm intrigued to see how much this pass rush can get there, get home, and put pressure on Will Rogers in order to help their secondary out. Offensively, I feel like the keys to the game is to be efficient. Be efficient offensively. I think they will make some plays against this defense of Mississippi State, but you gotta be careful not turning the football over because Mississippi State's going to try to steal some possessions. They're going to be aggressive and try to attack on the football, try to force turnovers. So if you're Jaden Daniels, gotta be very protective about holding on to the football and then just be efficient. Right? We've seen LSU has had no problems moving up and down the field on offense. Right? They had their problems of finishing plays in the red zone. So with seeing a guy like Wilkin Diggs, having him in the backfield, right? Having Caleb Jackson, a guy you can lean on in the running game and the goal line. Having this team execute in the red zone is going to be something I want to see too. Can they finish drives? Can they hit on explosive plays? Can they be more efficient going up and down the field and actually finishing off those drives with points some way or another, whether it's field goals or touchdowns? Can they finish those drives? That's what I really want to see. And how much more explosive can we see from this passing game? Can they grow on it? Will we see Chris Hilton play a lot more? Because he's really your biggest deep threat in terms of receivers. You got really good receivers, right? Now, can they be more consistent in catching the football? We've seen a lot. We didn't see a lot of those drop passes against Grambling. Can they go to more of that than we saw a couple drop passes against Florida State? So those are all questions we'll have to see. Those are really pretty much all keys. If y'all have anything that y'all want to add before I pretty much wrap this show up, please feel free to comment. If y'all have like a score prediction, want y'all to get involved. Appreciate everybody that's tuned into the show today. You can always go back and watch the show if you want to go back and watch it later on. But I'm going to go into my score prediction. I think LSU, it is a tricky spot for them, right? It's a 11 o'clock kickoff. It's on the road. It's in a hostile environment. The question is if LSU is going to be ready for this one, right? 11 o'clock. Not a big SEC stadium. It's not like going to Alabama or going to Florida or going to Texas A&M. Not going to a really big stadium, right? So is LSU going to be like just energy level? Will they be up to play? Because that was you would think that would have been the case with Florida State with being up and being the more energetic team, but you just didn't really see that against Florida State. Can they have that type of energy? Will they be ready to go? Will you be able to see that from the opening kickoff? Will they start strong? There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions to see what type of LSU team we'll see against Mississippi State. But on paper, I think LSU is the better team, and this is why I'm not really. And if you saw the show last week, I wasn't really freaking out about LSU losing to Florida State the way they did. I think this game just really went away from them. They're actually the better team in the first half. They were winning 17-14 in the first half and really missed some missed opportunities. They could have been up by like 17 in the first half, and the game just pretty much went away from them in the second half. So can LSU start off strong? I think they can. I think the offense is going to be humming. We're going to see the offense that we'll see in fall camp and towards the second half of the season last year. And I think this offense, they know that they're going to put it on them to score a lot. And really the schedule really favors LSU up to about probably Alabama. I mean, there's a lot of winnable games out there for LSU and really the rest of the way. I mean, I don't think there's a game on their schedule that they just go in there saying, oh, they're going to lose. I mean, they can beat pretty much anybody left that's on their schedule, even Alabama. And you saw the vulnerabilities Alabama had. Texas A&M lost. Alabama lost to Texas. Texas A&M lost to Miami. So SEC is not just this juggernaut this year so far from what we've seen. So I think LSU goes in there. They handle business. They go on the road. I think they win. Like they're still going to give up some plays on defense just because the defense still it's early in the season. I think the defense is going to get better, but I think LSU wins 34-23. It's going to be that type of score. I think in the end, I'll have more information about this too, and more of an in-depth preview about Mississippi State. That'll be on our website on tomorrow, so you can check out that preview and what I think about the LSU Mississippi State game. Well, guys, I appreciate y'all tuning in. I'm about to wrap up here. I hope y'all enjoy your football weekend. I know it was a big game, really one of the bigger games on Saturday is actually LSU Mississippi State. So hopefully y'all enjoy the game. Get up bright and early because it's an early one, 11 o'clock kickoff on ESPN. Should be a fun one, and looking forward to see how LSU does and what LSU looks like early in the morning in Starksville. Well, we'll be back on the show next week for another episode of The Chase with Jace, and we'll recap Mississippi State. We'll look ahead to Arkansas. And once again, if y'all have any questions on the show, feel free to ask. I'll always love to answer your questions if y'all have anything. Didn't have any questions today, but we had questions in the last couple of shows. So if you want to be involved, make sure you do. Comment. We'll love to answer your questions about LSU. Really, it should be another fun football weekend. So football, we're starting to get SEC play. We're starting to get into the thick of the season. So it's a very exciting time. So hopefully y'all enjoy it. Make sure to go gridironfootballusa.com for all of our LSU coverage. We'll have a pregame article and a postgame article. So after the game on Saturday, you'll get an article recapping the LSU, hopefully an LSU win against Mississippi State. But hope y'all enjoyed the show. I'm going to sign off. This has been The Chase with Jace, with your host, Jace Lejeune, and we'll see y'all next week on The Chase with Jace.